Friends, good morning. And welcome to worship in the historic sanctuary of the Fountain Street Church. My name is Nathan Dannison. I'm the interim minister here at Fountain Street, and we welcome you today. We welcome you whether you're joining us in person or online, whether this is your first time or whether this has been your home for ages. We welcome you, and we extend our welcome to people of all ages, of all dispositions, of all gender identities and sexual orientations. We welcome you regardless of your immigration status. You are where you belong today with us. People of all faith traditions and people of no faith traditions, you are welcome here, and this can be your church and your home. We will draw the circle wider, and then we will draw it wider still. No matter who you are, you're welcome today. A couple of brief announcements before we continue our worship. Our church has several spiritual groups, and a new spiritual group is forming that's facilitated by Meredith Bradley, a practitioner and member of this church, based on the 5 invitations. This is a spiritual group that will work through death and grief and these issues to find deeper and greater fulfillment in life. The first meeting of that group is this Friday at 10 a.m. here at the church, and there's a flyer about that available out there in the narthex as well. I strongly encourage you to come. It is good and strong medicine. Last Sunday, we had 18 people come forward to sign the membership book and tie themselves into the fabric of this place. I've been asked about this. We will be opening the book again in 2 weeks during worship on Sunday, March 16th. And please check your bulletin and the Church Center app and the website and the chimes for all of the events that are happening in the life of this church, and commit yourselves to the labor of this work. Today, our service is absolutely a banner day. Our guest preacher this morning is the Reverend Dr. Fred Wooden. Fred Wooden was ordained in the Unitarian Universalist Association. He's a fellow former student of Hyde Park as well, receiving his master's and doctorate from the University of Chicago Divinity School and Meadville. And Fred is a musician and a composer, and has numerous contributions in the very hymnal that is sitting before many of you. We'll in fact sing one of his hymns together in just a moment. Dr. Wooden served 6 congregations across the country, but in 2005 he was called and affirmed as the 11th senior minister of the Fountain Street Church by a vote of the entire congregation. His impact on this place over a decade and a half, I can't put into an introduction, but 2 pieces that I do want to call attention to. Fred was the driving force behind the current tradition of investing financially in this community, in the organizations, and in the people. This congregation puts more money directly into the hands of people in need and directly into nonprofits and community projects more than any church I've ever served in my career. And Fred is responsible for building that infrastructure and launching that vision, investing nearly $500,000 over the course of his tenure. Fred is also the minister who carried you into your current vision statement. So when you hear this vision of free the mind, grow the soul, and change the world, that is part and parcel of the impact that he had here. And I'm honored that he accepted my invitation to preach. And after worship, I hope that you'll join Fred and Wendy down here for a time of Q&A and connecting. And Fred, he did me a solid and invited David Lockington to perform with us today. David is another tremendous pillar of the culture of this city. And it's an honor to have him with us today as well. Friends, can we show our appreciation for their presence here with us today this morning? So to the work of peace, the work that we are about, not as some providential hope of future days and not as a bed of laurels upon which to rest, but peace as a practice, peace which is local, determined, costly, and necessary. And so receive this holy word and then share it with one another. Friends, may peace be with you. Let's go ahead and greet each other with words of peace and fellowship. want to invite all of the children who are here with us this morning to please come forward. I'm so sorry I did that wrong. Children, stay put for just a moment for our first reading. I'm on my toes today.
Our first reading comes to us from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 10. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?"
Jesus replied, "What is written in the law? How do you read it?"
He answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself."
Jesus replied, "You have answered correctly. Do this and you will live."
But the expert wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?"
In reply, Jesus shared this parable. A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened along the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came to where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. "Look after him," he said, "and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have."
Jesus asked the expert, "Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers?"
The expert in the law replied, "The one who had mercy on him."
Jesus told him, "Go and do likewise."
Thank you. And now I would like to invite all of the children forward to join me up here on the steps for a moment. I have someone special I want to introduce to you, and so I invite you to come forward for a blessing and to meet my new friend. And you don't have to be a little kid to come forward. I don't know that they have age requirements for character school either, so if... I know they do important work. Good morning. Fred, can I invite you to please come forward too? And oh my goodness, okay.
Hi there. I'm going to go around.
Sure, if you can.
Hello.
It's always an adventure.
Yes, always. Hi. So good to see you.
There he is. Good morning, team. How are you? Good morning. Good to see you all here. I know that in character school you're doing some really important work connecting justice to friendship and history, and so I was looking through some of my notes and some of the syllabus of the work that I completed in kindergarten in reviewing some of the important research that we were doing at the lab school I attended as a child, for which I blame a lot of things. But I saw in the notes that the teacher gave to my parents, they said, "Nathan loves to make friends." And I thought about that, and then I thought about all the ways that my friends have been the ones who've shown me how to do justice. And one of the things that I love about my friends is they've also shown me all of the things that I'm interested in. And I invited Fred, and I don't, how many of you have any of you met Fred before?
That guy.
There we go. That guy, I mentioned so. Fred was a minister of this church. He did the same thing that I do, and I asked Fred to come back today, and he did. And I asked Fred if he would share with you all one thing that he loves in this room that we've been talking about.
Okay.
So, sure.
Well, everybody talks about all those fancy glass windows, and there are a lot of them. Do you see the little one way in back? It's smaller than all the others, and you can see a little bit of light is coming from the sun. The sun just went behind a cloud, so it's not as exciting now. Do you know that window has a name? It is the children's window. And that's where the pictures of the children are. And there's a part of me that says, oh, of course it's the children's window, it's smaller. However, I think that's unfair. I think kids are as big as grown-ups.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And I want you to know that sometimes the smallest thing in a room can be the most important thing in a room.
I think you're right. This is how we make new friends. Today, I was hoping our blessing could be that this week we would watch for new friends and and watch closely for new friends to show the way. I know that you have important work to do. I don't want to keep you from it, but if you'd help me with this blessing, you can just raise a hand or both hands, or you can raise a foot or whatever you want to do, and just repeat after me. This week, we will watch for new friends.
For new friends.
Okay, you can make your way to your character school. And thank you. Good job.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. See you.
Okay. Now we gotta move over back up. Thank you.
We can
of man.
Yeah, there's two. But the lawyer, desiring to justify himself, said unto Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?"
The questioner in his heart knows the answer to this question, but in the moment he asks it, although he knows the answer, he wishes to evade the obligation to obey the commandment of God. The only answer he receives is, "You already know your duty. Do it, and you will live."
And who is my neighbor?
It is the sort of question you can keep on asking without ever getting an answer.
Who is my neighbor?
Does this question admit any answer? Is it my kinsman, my compatriot, my kindred Christian, or my enemy? There is an element of truth and falsehood in each of these answers. The commandment does not give me any clear directions and does nothing to solve my problems.
Who is my neighbor is the parting shot of despair or self-confidence. The lawyer is trying to justify his disobedience. The answer is, you are the neighbor. Go along and try to be obedient by loving others.
Neighborliness is not a quality in other people. It is simply their claim on us.
Every moment and every situation challenges us to action and to obedience. We have literally no time to sit down and ask ourselves whether so-and-so is our neighbor or not. We must get into action and obey. We must behave like a neighbor to them.
Perhaps this shocks you.
Perhaps you still think you ought to think things out beforehand, to figure out what you ought to do. And to that, there is only one answer.
You can only know and think about it by actually doing it.
So different, so much the same. Let me look at you. Oh my goodness. To behold so many faces I know and so many I don't. Oh. I think also of those whose faces are not here, but I remember, who fill the spaces between you, and some of you are sitting in their chairs. It's hard not to think of Mary Ann and Werner Veit, or Mary Lou Smith, or Paul Byron Smith, or Fred and Mary Jo Wensley, or Fred and Ruth Moen, or 100 other names who sat here and sang here and live their lives intertwined with yours and mine. What is that phrase out of the book of Hebrews? No, I think it's Romans 12. Compassed about as we are by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us run the race that is before us. The witnesses are not always in the flesh, you know. They occupy this space as solemn and yet strengthening ghosts who have given gifts just like you. The readings this morning were those suggested by me, and they're complicated. Did you ever know me to be easy? Part of the point of those readings was to remind us that we are not only compassed about by a crowd of witnesses, we are one of them, that we are entangled with the world, and that in the end, there is nothing of the bell that's ringing that does not toll for us. It's hard to believe it was exactly 5 years ago when I last stood in this spot. And you last sat in that spot looking at me. It's even harder to believe that it's exactly 20 years ago that I started preaching from this spot. My being here is no coincidence, of course. I suggested it to Nathan. He doesn't get all the credit. But he gets a great deal, by the way. He graciously allowed me to choose this date because it was so resonant with memories. He's been generous in other ways, saying to Whitney and me that we're welcome whenever we wish to drop by, especially for memorials. We've shared time collegially over coffee, and almost everything I say he writes down. I hope he goes home and drops it in a wastebasket. He is at least humoring me with graciousness. But I can tell he has a deep interest, care, and commitment to the deep, wide, long story that is Fountain Street Church. Isn't that the song? There's a fountain flowing deep and wide, and he wants to watch every drop of it go over and hear its burbling sound. You have chosen wisely. I feel good things for you. Now, I've thought about this sermon about 700 times, and I've thrown out each of them. But the profound changes in our nation in the last few weeks have made being merely nostalgic kind of preposterous. We are all anxious now about what the future holds, not just for this church, but for this community, for the nation, and for the world. And I have no idea how you or I or this community can take part in that future. I am so glad I am not your minister now. However, I am deeply glad and deeply grateful to have been your minister. So the remarks I have today do look back on the past, but I hope that they lift up things that you can reckon with as you discern your future. But let's start back in 2005. I arrived, and there were 1,350 members on the rolls, and 500 or 600 would come on Sundays. 100 kids and more were in character school. Fountain and Tower Club had 50 or more kids altogether. The Women's Association, who remembers guilds named after all the ministers, and they did different things. They had different meetings. I think I went to a guild meeting once a week. The ushers had an annual banquet, and it was a show. The choir had a great Christmas party. They even came to my house once, overwhelmed my capacities. There were adult classes all the time. We had a staff of over 20. There were 3 ministers. We were something to be reckoned with. I sensed immediately a confidence built from a long history of prominence. You were not just liberal, but you were independent, not part of any denomination. As I've put it, you're so liberal you wouldn't dare hang out with other liberals. This all took place before I was part of your story. But in the 2010s, there was a thought, maybe we should join a body, and you considered joining the Unitarian Universalists, and you were not going along. Being independent is as important to you as being liberal. Those things have remained the same from what I can tell. But everything else has changed. In 2005, I hoped to be the next chapter in your long and storied journey of prosperity and prominence. By 2020, that was clearly not the case. I have often felt it was my fault that I did not bring and sustain the growth and strength and majesty that you have enjoyed. That feeling I had seemed divinely confirmed when in my last weeks in this sanctuary, COVID came along and sent us all home early. And my service ended in a virtual sermon delivered online to a variety of unseen people. For a church, including a minister who loved this space and the echoing power of its memories, well, let's put it this way, my service ended not with a bang, but with a whimper. I went down to Arizona, which place could not be more different than Grand Rapids. They don't do winter there. I served as an interim for a smaller congregation. And in that 2-year period, I had the occasion to see in a mirror dimly, as Paul puts it, meaning through the life of another congregation, what clergy are really for. You know, you have to step away from who you've been to see who you are. And I discerned that something I needed to know was there. You know of my practice of going on long pilgrim walks, and I still do it. Well, that smaller church in Arizona was a pilgrimage for me as a clergy person. In a way, I stepped away, went on a walk away from the familiar so that I could come back and realize what I had not noticed before. The first thing I realized after doing 2 years of interim work is that we are all interim ministers, regardless of how long we serve, be it 2 years or 20. No one of us gets to own the church we serve. It's not ours, ever. The second thing I realized is that spiritual leadership is not about growing the body of a church, although that can happen. It's about growing its soul. Some of you may remember that, as Nathan reminded you, that I define liberal religion, not just us, but all of us, as freeing the mind, growing the soul, and changing the world. I still believe that. I even wrote a book about it. You can find it on a publishing platform that we're not talking much about right now. It's very cheap. You won't do him any favors, I guarantee. But what became clear to me as I was down in Arizona is this task of freeing the mind, growing the soul, and changing the world was not just for you and you and you and me and me. It was for an institution as well, because institutions have souls. This church has a soul. I learned in Arizona, or relearned in Arizona, that if the size of the church becomes the measure of its success, it has failed. There are mega churches everywhere with thousands of members and scads of money who are doing more harm than good because they are pursuing Caesar, not God. They are pursuing power, not principle. I could even say a nation has a soul. And that if it pursues power and prestige instead of principle, that it too is in serious decline. But I'm not here to talk about them. I'm here to talk about you. And I'm saying you, not us, because I'm only watching now. My hope is to recall a few things where I think you had a chance to grow your soul. And that was a motto I used a lot because one of the folks I learned from as a boy in my Unitarian church came from a fellow named A. Powell Davies, who was in Washington, D.C., preaching to members of the Supreme Court, and said at some point, life is just a chance to grow a soul. You can screw it up. You can waste that chance. And most of us have to go back and learn a bunch of lessons that we were taught a long time ago, like those in kindergarten. Glorious as this place is, and it is glorious, your spiritual growth did not take place here while I was here. You have heard better preachers. You have heard more magnificent music. Apologies to the excellent music we have. You've been fuller, but the greatest opportunity to grow your soul came elsewhere, when I took you out into the community, to a community that you welcomed in, but I insisted you go out and meet in some way. Also, in that wonderful book of Hebrews, I do quote the Bible a lot for a liberal, don't I? It is said that do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers. Are you hearing the reading now? Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares. The first angel came when I helped to arrange for an iftar. Anyone remember going to the iftar? The iftar is an evening meal held during the month of Ramadan, which month we are in right now, by the way, when observant Muslims fast food and drink from sunup to sundown. But boy, once the sun goes down, they party hardy. They do. People say if you observe Ramadan, you will gain weight. They do. Well, working with one of the masjids in town, thanks to some connections we had found, they came in. They brought the food. We partied hardy. But more important, we learned by being with them what it was like to be who they were at that moment. And the most important moment was not the eating, but when they went into the chapel next door and they made salat, prayer, in our chapel. That came to me as a moment of greatness for this church, because a few months later, we were hosting the Interfaith Thanksgiving service in this space. All these clergy were here, Protestants, Roman Catholics, non-religious, and the same fellow who had been here to conduct the iftar with us. He was late. My wife, Wendy, was outside waiting in the narthex there to help him find a seat. And he said, "I'm so sorry I'm late. But before I go in, I must make salat. May I use the chapel that is my usual place?" And I thought for a moment, Fountain Street is the usual place for Muslims to make prayer. We have succeeded in ways we had never imagined. When a Muslim feels they can pray in this church, you have grown your soul. We extended that interfaith to eating. We partied hardy with the Hindus. They brought a lot of good food in then too, and we made arati, reverence for the goddess who was being observed in the Diwali celebrations. I went to Varanasi a few years later, and they made arati there, and I knew what they were doing because my soul had grown, because I encountered the Hindu community. We shared a model Passover with the community of Ahavas, Israel, where I attend worship on a regular basis, and you met them and you got to be part of that experience, not just read about it. We went beyond talking about differences and started living them. That's where you grow your soul, when you must encounter the different, deal with it on its terms. So the next angel, though, that was more daring. And yes, I'm going to go over 20 minutes. Who remembers the Kalamazoo Challenge when it came out, when all the money down in Kalamazoo said, if you get through Kalamazoo High School, we'll put you through State College. And I said, we could do that. There's more money up here than down there. Did we do it? No. Not as a town. But I asked, what if we, meaning Fountain Street Church, could pay the tuition of one person going to GRCC who couldn't afford it? And you did it. Year after year. It's not a lot, but at least one person every year didn't have to think about getting a second job in order to go to school. You did that. You took money that would have stayed here and you put it over there. I have pictures of some of those kids. I wonder what they're doing now. But they are your emissaries. But I went a step further, and as Nathan Noah said, well, have you noticed, I said to the governing board, that we spend about as much on social action as we take in the offering every year. Why don't we just take the offering and give it to social action, just get rid of it? And we started doing that. All the cash that fell on the plate, all of it, went right back out into the community. And over how many years, it turned into $500,000. But don't take pride in that part. Take pride that you supported a boys' football team that operated out of Martin Luther King Park, and he needed to buy helmets, and he wanted $500 that no one else would give him. And you gave him that. People came in and they pitched their projects to the Social Action Committee. We learned about health projects, and we learned about sports projects and music projects and tutoring and all the things that we would never have heard about unless we had gone to them. But by having this money, we were able to be in relationship with communities we didn't even know about. You were growing your soul. Now, it's going to get harder from this point on, because those are the easy ones. Around 2011, who remembers Occupy Wall Street? One of those moments that didn't turn out as expected. But we had our own group. They marched in town, and I did something foolish. I said, why don't you camp in our parking lot? And they did. But the parking lot is for people who come to church, and they didn't take up much space. Let me make that clear. But it didn't go down well, let me put it that way. Because you see, I had gone a step further than perhaps I should have. There was a long-standing, unmarked line in the sand that says, Fountain Street as an institution does not take political stands. And I get that, I understand that. I just don't agree with it. To be clear, churches really are free to express positions on issues. They cannot endorse candidates or parties. They cannot say vote for this or do not vote for that. But when a church or a minister raises moral concerns about poverty, hunger, race, gender, sexuality, poverty, these issues are inevitably political because they're about where we put our resources as a nation and as a city. You're going to have dissent. You're going to have controversy. Mind, I hate conflict. I hate it desperately. I'll avoid conflict all day long. Just ask Wendy. Whatever she says, I say yes. But I'm always reminded that in this role, I had an obligation to make the moral questions of today real to you in this house. This was no sanctuary from the world. It is a sanctuary into the world. And as hard as that is, I still had to do that. Long ago, the Bishop Dom Helder Camara observed, when I feed the poor, they call me a saint. When I ask why the poor are hungry, they call me a communist. It is good to serve the poor. It is better to condemn those who make them so. the third angel, by the way. Because it's fine to help people out there, even with our money, which I love very much. But are you ready to welcome them in? Homeless folks started sleeping on the portico, in part because the folks of Occupy started sleeping there. They know a good spot when they see it. The portico was covered. It was good. Now, there were problems, and eventually we couldn't permit it anymore because some people who live on the street are not very sociable, not very safe. We tried, though. We tried very hard to make it possible and safe, but it was not possible. What pained me was not that we couldn't sustain it, was that some folks struggling, I understand, in this community were uncomfortable with that kind of people being close to us. You have changed. I walked in today and found some of the folks I remember warming themselves with coffee at in the social hall. People who don't belong to the church, who don't belong to you, and yet are part of this community because they have found sanctuary here in a way that you ought to offer it. I remember one couple in particular. Oh, he was old and black and had a face covered with cysts and blisters from some skin disease. He was not a very appealing person. She was young and white and blind. She helped him walk. He helped her see. I was watching the Samaritan help a Samaritan. The fallen helped the fallen, and they found safety and warmth in our hall for an hour. Now, these are all things that sound like that changed the world part, and maybe they did, or maybe they didn't. But it really was about growing the soul. It meant engaging with things beyond the comfort zone every church has, and with difficulty. There are people who have left the church because we welcomed or allowed those who are not like us to be among us. There are those who will miss, and I understand the missing, believe me, I do, the grandeur this place had, which was magnificent. But what can I say? 2025 is not 2005. I recently ran into a photograph taken by Bill Thompson when I arrived. He's a good photographer. I looked at that photograph taken when I was 52. I was a young 52. I could pull off 46. My hair was dark. There was more of it. My voice was deeper, more manly. I am now 72. I'm entitled to park at the senior locations at the YMCA, and I do. And when someone else pulls in who isn't, I give them a cranky old man look. My hair is grayer and thinner. My face is wrinkled. I have liver spots. At least I have a liver. I'll take that and go with it. Cancer took a bite out of my right ear. I put new lenses in my eyes. My hips are getting louder. I have what they used to call the rheumatiz. I am not the man I was in 2005, and I do not want to be that man, because for all the things I've lost, I have gained much more. I have a son who was married in this church almost exactly 10 years ago, was it? What? In April. Yeah, I'm always being corrected. I need correction, what can I tell you? Married here, and I got to pronounce it. Choked up then, too. I have walked with so many of you through parts of your life. And those who are not here, I was able to offer a dignified moment of passing. There is no greater honor. We are not the same people we were 20 years ago, nor should we be. Nor should we want to be going back to that any more than we want a nation to go back to what it was in 1950 or 1850. Like me, figuring out who you are right now and where you're going is going to be an adventure in itself. Nathan, I wish you every good fortune. I wish you the good fortune he can bring you. But what is this community but a community whose history has always been up for an adventure? You are always ready to say, why not? Let's give it a whirl. What happens if it fails? We'll do something else. You are a pilgrim church, as I am a pilgrim parson. You want to know what lies ahead. And the only way to find out is to go there. I am not your spiritual leader anymore, and like I said, I'm very grateful for that. But I can be your spiritual cheerleader. I can stand at home and go, you go! For there is no doubt in my mind that you will blaze a trail in this wild world we now have. You will blaze a trail that others will need to follow in your footsteps. And if you know what pioneers do, they're the ones who get all the cuts and bruises because they have to move all the brush out of the way to find their way. It's the fellow behind you who gets to walk tall and strut. Your job is not to strut. Your job is to cut your way through all the underbrush until you know where you're going. That's what you do. It is hard. It is confusing. You will get lost. And believe me, getting lost is part of the adventure. You will be bewildered. You will pay prices. But you will also keep going. You will keep going. You've climbed mountains, you've forded streams, you've gotten soaked to the skin, you've been baked by the sun. And if you wonder now whether it was worth the effort to do all the things you got to do, this much I know. Whatever your fate and future is, and though I can only watch it from the sidelines, you are needed. You are compassed about not only by a crowd of witnesses, by a crowd that needs people saying, where Fountain Street goes, we need to follow. They will show us where we need to go. And no, you don't know which way to go yet, but they don't either. And here's the fun part. They won't know when you're wrong either. You have a moment right now when the fountain can be dug deeper. You will get dirty and wet, but the waters will flow. And you will be able to say, this was the well we dug so that those in need could drink. Be blessed. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be found true in thy sight, thou who art my rock and my Redeemer. Amen.
Friends, through and by your giving, the important work of this congregation is sustained and enhanced in this community. At this time, I want to invite the ushers to come forward and receive your gifts and your pledges and your offerings. And thank you. or away in the wilderness, that we will make of these gifts a pledge and a promise for those who will come after us. So may it be. Friends, let us join our voices together again. Come, thou fount of every blessing.
Dorothy Day, that worker of heart and hand and soul, reminds us of our tasks. People say, what is the sense of our small effort? They cannot see that we must lay one brick at a time. Take one step at a time. A pebble cast into a pond causes ripples that spread in all directions. Each one of our thoughts, words, and deeds is like that. No one has a right to sit down and feel helpless. There's too much work to be done. Go forth and do likewise. Amen.